Well, let's get the latest analysis now on the situation on the ground in Ukraine. I'm now joined by retired Air Vice-Marshal Sean Bell, who's also advisor to Universal Defence and Security Solutions. And Sean, let's just focus in on the southeast of the country. Just bring us up to date with the developments there.
Well, in Mariupol, despite President Putin's very public direction to his generals to put a ring of steel around the steelworks so not a fly can enter it, in reality, what's actually happening is that the offensive continues against those Ukrainians still trapped in the city. I think what that's pretty evident, even though some of the troops have been taken away, Russian troops for the Donbass, it's pretty evident that Mariupol remains a thorn in the side of Putin, and whilst the fighting still goes on, he can't claim victory there. Further north, I think the fighting is pretty intense, but tellingly, it's over about a 300-mile front. Russian forces spread themselves very thinly. There's lots of sporadic attacks probing the Ukrainian defences. And what seems likely to be happening is a tension between the Russian military wanting to focus their efforts to actually achieve a success and the political direction which wants rapid results to be able to announce to the people. And it looks like the politics is winning at the moment. Meanwhile, whilst they're doing a fairly limited front, the fighting will remain intensive. The Ukrainians are certainly, though, creating a lot of havoc and attriting a lot of the Russian forces.
And Sean, Ukraine says it's hoping to get more military support from the US. What kind of weapons are we looking at? And crucially, what impacts would it have?
Yes, I think we've got to, as the whole campaign has changed from being a whole of the country to much more focused in the Donbass, we've heard President Zelensky's language change from just weapons, weapons, weapons to now heavy weapons. And the most recent military aid from America, one of the items is the 155mm howitzer gun shown here. The Americans originally committed 18 of these guns. They've now committed another 78 of them, together with the vehicles that will tow them around, and also, tellingly, 144,000 rounds of ammunition as well. And, of course, that'll be a mixture of high explosive and illumination rounds, and also conducting some training outside of Ukraine to prepare the people. This gun's interesting because it first saw service in 1942. It was a US Army gun. It showed service in the Second World War, in Vietnam and in Korea. So part of you sort of wondering, why is that an old bit of weapon like this going out to Ukraine? Well, the reality is this, augmented with technology, makes it much more effective. And nowadays, the gun is only as effective as what you can hit. These now link to radars which track the rounds being fired to see where they land, and then can automatically put a course correction in azimuth and elevation on the gun so it hits its target much more accurately. And I think that, particularly in the theatre of Ukraine, could be a really valuable asset for them. So then the obvious question here is that these weapons are quite old, so will they be getting any new weapons at all, Ukraine? Well, I think, the mix of weapons the Americans announced, the other thing they announced was very new, was the 121 Phoenix Ghost unmanned air vehicles. That's not this at the moment, which is a very secretive. We've not seen this thing deployed before. It turns out the Americans have been chatting to the Ukrainians about their specific requirements for the Donbass, and it turns out that weapons that the Americans had already been developing and had on the shelf could meet that absolute requirement. So we don't know much about it. We don't think it's been deployed before. The Americans have used the Switchblade before, which is here, which is in effect a suicide drone. It flies, finds its target, attacks it, and then blows up. And we believe that the Phoenix Ghost has a similar sort of capability, but also with some optics available. So it can do some reconnaissance, identify targets, potentially send that information back. But it's a really interesting blend the Americans done at old and new, but it's specifically tailored to what Ukraine needs today. The challenge, I think, more widely, is that it's one thing getting these weapons, providing them to the Ukrainians, is quite another. How do you get them from the point of entry, probably around on the West Coast border there, all the way across to where the fighting is happening? In the past, when we've had handheld missiles or guns, you can put them in the boot of a car. They're relatively easy to hide. 155 artillery and are not going to be easy to hide in bulk, and we're not the only nations that have satellite technology looking down. So the security issues here are significant, and it will take time to move them across. And of course, at the moment in this conflict, time is at a premium. Absolutely. So some further support, but of course that presents further challenges as well. That's right. Sean Bell, thank you very much indeed.